Hey, what's up, guys? Alex Rodriguez here with Bay Cities Construction, and today I want to talk to you about balconies. I want to talk to you about the common areas where balconies are damaged and what the common damage is occurred, how it occurs, what causes it, right? And I'm also going to be talking to you about some of this really cool custom hardware that I have that's going to help lower your inspection costs when it's time to recertify those balconies in a few years. So let's get into it, guys. I want to start off with some pictures of a current balcony that we've been working on or that we have worked on in the past. As you can see here, we've got a scupper to the right. That's basically your drain. And then to the left, you can see where there's a chunk of stucco missing. That's pretty much, let me zoom in here so you guys can see what I'm looking at. All right, so this is where there's stucco missing. And behind there, there's some flashing. To the right of that is the scupper. That's this little section here. So most of the leaks that occur that have a lot of structural damage is in the area of where the scuppers are, and this is no different. There's actually quite a bit of damage in here, as we'll see in the following pictures, that originate from a scupper that the flashing has failed. So behind here, you've got missing stucco, and the stucco only falls off when you have some rusting and stuff behind it, behind the flashing that's in the rear. And we're going to go through some of these pictures right now. So here's a wide shot of the same area, slightly to the left. You can see that the people over time have been sealing it with some type of caulking. You see this very commonly in buildings where people want to postpone the inevitable, which is the replacement of the waterproofing. And in here, this waterproofing has gotten several coats, so that's why it's not flaking. But make no mistake about it, this waterproof system has completely lived out its lifespan, and it is leaking in multiple places. This is a close-up view of that crack that I showed you earlier, and you can see that somebody's trying to put some sealer on it. And from what the owner told me, he said he spent quite a bit of money chasing the gremlins and patching up stuff and painting it. This is the exterior wall of the building, and this is the exterior wall of the building where it meets the decking. And I want to put draw your attention to this door here. This door is a retrofit door, which means that it was cut in place without breaking the stucco, and that means that it doesn't have very good waterproofing along the vertical lines, and it also is very low to the ground. See how there's almost no space to properly waterproof underneath that doorway. And there's another scupper there. That scupper, by the way, was leaking, and you'll see the kind of damage that occurred from this constant leak. I tell folks all the time when I do these inspections that if the worst thing that could happen is that you could have a slow leak. A slow leak means that you're not going to take care of it because it's a slow leak. It'll seep in and starts to get absorbed by the components inside the wall, and nobody ever fixes them. And you can see that the tenant here had plants, which, guess what, have to be watered, and that water sits on the deck. So if you have a rental and you've got tenants that have plants and are watering those decks, they are actively damaging the building. Now, some people are like, well, you expect people not to have any plants. I'm like, yeah, I expect them not to have any plants, because if watering those plants and rubbing and running heavy pots over the waterproofing causes damage over time, you're just damaging the building, right? So that's just a reality of the situation. Now, in here, I took this picture so that you could see that there are no gutters. So the entire roof line of this section of the building is dumping water when it rains on the balcony. And that's fine, I suppose, if your balcony waterproofing is in tip-top shape. But if it's not, you're going to have leaks, you're going to have problems. So this is another picture of another scupper, and of the section. You can see that there's mold. It's dark. It's got some algae growing there. You got a little crack there that was patched, and you can see how the crack came back. You've also got some rusting. When I see rusting on that, that copper type color on flashing, that's always a bad idea. When you see mold like this, green algae growing on on the outside stucco, that means that's constantly wet there, and you're probably going to have a bit of damage when you open it up. Now, this scupper actually has cracks around the perimeter of it. It's got cracks above it, and it's got a crack at the lower left corner. And there is a tremendous amount of damage behind here, even though at the time I first looked at it, I was able to make a prediction that there was quite a bit of damage. So this is the area, the garage area directly underneath that balcony. And you can see that there's mold growing through the drywall, and there's several sections of texture that have fallen due to the excessive moisture over time. This is a close-up picture of one of the scuppers on the outside. You can see that there's copper and dark copper on the wall, and then on the underneath the overhang, you can see that there's mold down there. That's all signs of a fungus infestation. You'll see once we open this stuff up that there's quite a bit of damage. So this is a little bit out of order, but that parapet wall had so much termite and dry rot that it had to be gone. Where this corner is here, that's where that scupper was, and you could see the entire exterior rim board in that section was completely damaged. This is the inside of the parapet wall. You could see where the waterproofing up here, what the water kept penetrating it, and it wet this wood, and it caused the subterranean termites to come out. Now, many of you would not imagine that there could be this much damage based on the parapet wall that I just showed you earlier. And the thing is that the stucco really holds things together because, as you know, stucco is masonry. So it very well could be that the stucco is the only part holding up that section in there. And you can see how deep the termite tunnels run in that parapet wall. Now, this is the look through the driveway side. So you can see that there's algae growing on the top of these. If you see this type of algae growing on your parapet walls, you're probably going to have termite damage there. You could also have some fungus damage there. Basically, the stucco in this section has deteriorated and eroded off. And this is from the morning dew. Every single morning down here in the South Bay, you're going to get that early morning fog that condenses on top of those parapet walls. And if the waterproofing isn't in good shape behind the stucco, you're going to have water penetrating it. This is a wide shot of the parapet wall, and we opened up the top and the bottom because we wanted to see how bad the connections were compromised, and pretty much this entire wall had to go. So the guys are demoing it out, and we've come to terms with the fact that they're going to be removed. This is a section, when I talk about fungus damage, this is what fungus does to your wood. It really starts to grow this, it really deteriorates it, and you'll see this white, like peach fuzz all over that stuff, and that's basically an active fungus infestation. If you were to make the mistake of nailing a fresh piece of wood to this without removing the fungus, you're just feeding the fungus, and it'll just spread to the new wood. In this scenario, all of the floor framing had to go too, because it was so extensive. When we removed this section under the door, you could see the section of this plywood here that broke. The guy's foot went through there because it was just hollowed out. The framing underneath the door was gone too because it was leaking at the door. Again, constantly putting caulking on this does not solve the problem, guys. You got to remove that door, and you've got to fix whatever is soft, whatever is rotting. That entire section underneath the wall was gone. Where I showed you that wall connection to the deck connection, if that flashing is no longer intact, it will allow moisture to get in and the subterranean termites to start coming in and taking over. This looked like some type of a repair that was done at some point. It was just not a very good repair, and pretty much all of those floor joists had to be removed from the building. You can see this section here. There's actually 2 inches of wood missing on that, and it's probably been compromised 50% of its thickness, which means that it's got to go. By the way, anytime there's more than 10% damage, you have to replace that whole thing because it has a structural It has been structurally compromised. Now, over on this side, there was another scupper, if you may or may not remember, but you can see here that this is the floor framing, the floor joist framing, and the wall below it has also been it has a structural component to it. It has shear walls, which is what helps keep the opening for the garage intact during an earthquake. And with this kind of damage, there was practically no shear strength, or the shear strength had been substantially diminished. You can see here that the corner, all of that stuff is not intact anymore. You could run a pencil through that stuff and just pick it apart. It's been basically damaged by termites and dry rot. You can see that this is a chunk of that sheer plywood that I removed with my hand. It's basically gone. Right here, you could see the guys cut. They easily broke off the 2x4 framing from the stucco because it's all hollowed out. Really needed to be changed out. Another piece of plywood. This is kind of a wide shot. Once we remove the parapet wall, I write the contract so that it includes the pricing of the waterproofing and the things that we know about, but it makes sense to do a limited demo and discovery where you remove some of the sections of stucco and expose that wood so that the engineers can see the quality of the connection if it's been deteriorated, so that it could be replaced. Okay, going back over to some of these pictures here, you could see the insulation and the floor frame. This is before we remove the floor framing, but that's pretty much got to go. All of that floor framing has been compromised. Where the guy standing is the center of the span, and there were sections of wood that were significantly deteriorated. This connection here on the corner is completely gone. There's no way to salvage that. That's got to be removed completely. And now here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about with the scuppers. You could see that the scupper had a flashing. It's all gone around the perimeter of that scupper. There's nothing there. And as a result, the water has been constantly dripping there off the deck and into the wood, the surrounding wood. And you can see that that's caused dry rot to set in place. So again, there's no salvaging this. This has to be removed. The parapet walls, this is when we first discovered that the parapet walls on this section had to be replaced also. Once we did that demo, you could see that there's termite damage and parapet walls. In this picture, you could see a wider shot of that where we exposed this. This was preliminary demo, so we can assess the damage of the floor joist and the fascia board. And it was determined that the fascia board had to go, but the floor joists were not damaged where they come out of the building. They were damaged on the ends, so we were able to save that. This is the full wall, the structural wall that's to the left of the garage door opening where the plywood was, where I showed you the flaking plywood. You can see that there's mold growing on the paper of the drywall and that these wood members are compromised. All of that wood eventually was removed, and so was the drywall behind that wall. It was infested with mold, and it had to be removed. So all of the flaky stuff that had damage, such as this, this is basically changed direction on a 2x4 here. It's not a 4x4, but that was removed, and that spigot was moved over so that that entire section could be repaired. Looking up, you could see that the top plates were replaced. It wasn't until later that the guys came back and replaced all the interior studs that had damage. Again, this is part of this challenge with this job was that as we kept peeling, more stuff was exposed. So in this picture, you could see that the plywood, the framing has been replaced, and the plywood runs all the way to the top. That little section over the garage of stucco was eventually also removed because there's no point in keeping that. It'll just create a constant cracking there, so we replaced that entire section of stucco. Here is a progress picture of the rim being replaced as we were working. And then this is the framing that was replaced over the garage opening. You can see that literally that's all new wood. That entire framing section of that diaphragm had to be redone. This is the fresh studs that were basically, that whole wall got reframed. And since the drywall is no longer, you're holding up the, is no longer making contact with the new wood, that drywall was also demolished and replaced. Kind of a wide shot of both sections there. And here's the return section over the driveway. You can see that all of these little sections that were cantilevered were installed brand new. They're basically home runs. They go almost 14 feet to the other side. That's the entire ceiling of the laundry that's under that deck. All of that moldy stuff was removed and it's gone. And here in this section, you can see that the stucco was removed over the garage door, and we ended up just putting plywood on everything all the way through. More evidence of the, sorry, go back here. More evidence of studs, vertical studs. I believe we had to replace, once we took that door out, that exposed the fact that that stud was ruined. These pieces here of, on the cripple wall, that was just removed once the new framing above was installed and solid. This is a total rebuild. All of the sections on this piece here that were damaged were removed. All of anything that had rot was removed, or anything that had fungus was removed. This section, the diagonal framing that represented the subfloor, was replaced with CDX. CDX is a special exterior plywood that is required in order to put a waterproof system above it. This is the section of the catwalk once it was replaced, and it's still in a rough brown coat, but you can see the wood framing that's wrapped in stucco now, and that represents your strength. Now, that brings me to a very interesting point here with these screens. So you could see that these screens go in, and in this case, we separated them. We separated them strategically so it would cover the most amount of space. But I want to take you over to the screens that I have here at the studio, and these are screens that you open up, and you can basically run a camera through here, and it allows you to inspect the bays. Every 5 or 6 years, you're gonna, depending on whether you're an HOA or an apartment building, you're gonna have mandatory inspections, and you're gonna have to inspect. So this makes it very easy for your inspector to just open up the bottom of the skrid and take a look inside there. Now, we strategically place them under the doorways. So, and we spaced them out wherever we found we had a critical connection. So under the doorways is a very common area where doors leak. So we want to be able to have them inspected. And we put one of these under each doorway. Now, these come in different sizes. They're custom made. They also have a mesh on them. They don't allow bugs in. And it also creates a hard, in the event that there's a fire or anything, it creates a hard barrier for it to penetrate in here. So once it gets installed, these flanges, stucco goes behind the flanges, and the inspector opens the little doors, and they can look right up inside here with a camera. They can look at both ways. If you install it kind of center of your balcony, it'll make it easier to look both ways, but most of the time, as long as the opening is nice and wide in the bays, the inspectors can put their equipment in there. These screens are custom made. They can be made in 24 inches wide, or they can be made in 36. You can make them 42. Pretty much, they're custom made, so they can be made in any dimension that you need. Actually, also. I think it's really important to have these on there. It's going to really cut the cost of inspections down the road. It may be one of those things that you maybe initially you're apprehensive about the expense, but believe me, it's going to drop the time that it takes to inspect your building to a fraction of the time. And in here, you could see what they look like once the stucco's in. Now, granted, their stucco doesn't have any color yet. This is the brown coat, but you can see how they're going to sit, and they're very easy to open and operate after the stucco has been installed. So we basically installed these in all of the sections that would have to be inspected down the road. All right, the next part is I want to talk to you about the common types of framing damage. So there's certain sections here that I want to kind of go back to so that you can understand what is happening and why the damage is occurring. So the doors are one of the main causes of damage. This door here, you can see that there's on the vertical studs to the left of the door, you can see that that's damaged. The doors will cause damage either on the sides of the door where the stud meets the floor plate, or they'll cause damage directly in front of the door, which is a lot more expensive if you have damaged. And what I mean by by floor joists, I mean these members here. Basically, they're the pieces of wood that hold up the floor system and that are cantilevered into the unit. Okay, so you definitely don't want those getting damaged. The next cause of major damage are the scuppers. So here in this picture, you can see the new scupper. You can see how well waterproof that bad boy is. There's vegetathene underneath there, the paper's on top of it, and that's going to get another layer of vegetathene and mesh and stuff around it so that it's tip top. On the inside part where the balcony surface is, you're also going to have flashing around the wall part and the base. So the doors are a cause of the leaking. The scuppers are a cause of the leaking, and the other cause of the leaking are where the wall meets the decking itself. This section here. And you can see that from these cracks, it didn't look like it was that bad, but it ended up being tremendously bad because of the amount of time that the building was neglected. And I don't know that neglecting is the right term, but I would say that for the amount of time that the building was left without being properly repaired. And properly repaired would mean that the floor system, the old waterproof system, would be removed, the stucco would be broken at the bottom, you get new flashing, and then a new system put in. I want to talk to you guys about some of the common brackets of pricing of what this thing costs to do once you have some damage and now you got to get it fixed, right? So people are always very anxious about that. Basically, you have three main brackets, and I'm going to go through them with you. So if you were to have just straight waterproofing, you only have surface cracks, like in this video or in this picture here, or the surface is flaking or damaged or puddling, things like that nature. Basically, you could just waterproof it. However, I would recommend that you also break the stucco anytime you waterproof it and put in new flashing, especially if you see any kind of rusting on that perimeter flashing. If you have any kind of rusting, that just triggers, hey, it's got to go. If it's not leaking right now from the flashing, it will leak from the flashing because the flashing is actively oxidizing. So if you have a straight up waterproofing system that doesn't require any flashing replacement, you're looking at between $6,000 to $9,000 for let's say a 60 to 75 square foot deck, something like that. If you've got some damage and you know you've got to replace the subfloor because the subfloor has been compromised, let's say it's spongy, anything like that, you're looking at, and you know that you got to break the stucco and run new flashing. Kind of the next tier is going to be between 15 and 20K, between 15 and 20,000, could be 24, 25,000. It really is just going to depend on how much damage is behind the wall. Now, if you've got a sliding door, a 6-foot sliding door or a 6-foot French door, and it's sitting low, like in the pictures that I showed you earlier, I suggest that you replace that door and make that door 2 inches shorter. That will allow us to put wood under the door and be able to properly waterproof it with flashing, with new metal flashing. And that's going to add between $5,500 to $7,500 to the cost. In some cases, we put in like a 10 or 12 foot door. You're probably looking at 10 grand, maybe 12,000 bucks per door. So the larger the door becomes, the more expensive it is, obviously. But we're talking for this, the purposes of this exercise, we're talking about a 6 foot door. Okay. Now, if you have major damage like this balcony, you have to have structural framing replaced, and you have to have handrails replaced, etc. You have to have floor framing done. You got to open up the section into the house because these boards are cantilevered. You're going to have a major repair. You're easily looking at $50,000 to $70,000. It very well may be over $100,000. It'll just depend on how much damage you actually have. But once you have structural damage, it is normally found in the areas where the scupper is, where the doors are, wherever there's a floor drain or a scupper. Those will be the sections that, if they've been neglected for a long time, are going to have a lot of damage. But you should just consider that this is not going to be a $5,000-$6,000 balcony repair. Once you have structural damage, it's a very serious thing. You could have the balcony actually collapse. And we have come across some projects where we had to shore up the balcony because a collapse was imminent. So hopefully this helps. If you guys have any questions, any comments, please make sure you post them below. I'll love to answer your questions. I'd love to talk to you over the phone. If you've got some pictures, or if you have a balcony that you want to talk to me about, please make sure you take some pictures of the balcony from above. Make sure you take some pictures of the balcony from below, from the street level. You can send the email pictures to brian@baycitiesconstruction.com. That's brian@baycitiesconstruction.com. He'll pop it down there so you can see it real quick. Just take a little screenshot while I'm talking, and you'll be able to get that email address when you need it. And hey guys, if we have to rebuild your balcony, no problem. We have the structural expertise. We have the framers. We have the structural engineers. All of these people, all of these resources are here to help you and to get you through this process of becoming compliant and dealing with balconies that have a severe amount of damage. Most of the balconies that we get are major jobs because we are able, as a general contractor, we're able to do the whole thing. We can take you from getting you plans done all the way through replacing doors and windows to match everything that you'll need in order to get the balconies either rebuilt or repaired correctly. We have a game plan for putting together the right waterproofing system for your application. That's also very important. And our guys are certified by the manufacturer to apply Life Specialty Coatings. By the way, a shout out to them. They have a great product that we love using all the time. And hey guys, if you have any questions, please post them in the comments. Send me your pictures to brian@baycitiesconstruction.com. And my name is Alex with Bay Cities Construction, reminding you, you don't need a contractor. You need a team of pros. Thanks for watching.